let me. Awesome sauce. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all in your membership on this Advocacy Day. I am Alicia DeFazio, President.
Wait, hold on, Alicia. I wanna do proper intros. And we're still letting people in, so let's do that. You gotta let me do proper intros, but we're gonna get right to you all. You know, I gotta have a little ceremony. You know,
It's quite okay. I didn't know how we want to proceed. It's good.
It's my fault. I didn't tee it up. So Hallie, do you want to kind of kick us off and give the instructions?
Sure. Let me turn my camera back so everyone can see who's talking. Welcome everyone to our quick budget briefing meeting with Councilmember McDuffie's office. This is a webinar, and we do appreciate everyone logging on what seems to be everyone's day off now. And so, just real quickly, this is a webinar. We can't see you or hear you, but you can see and hear us, the presenters. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. And other than that, we can go ahead and get going.
Okay, so welcome everybody. I think it goes without saying that this is probably, since I've been at CNHED, one of the most different budget seasons that we faced. And for so many reasons, post-public health emergency, influx of federal funds, a heightened emphasis by our council leadership and as well as our mayoral leadership around, in some ways, both complementary, but also in some ways differing policies and priorities. I want to thank Alicia and Brett for joining us today. As everyone knows, both the president and the mayor announced today Juneteenth holiday. We were prepared to reschedule out of respect for their times, but they quickly said, nope, we're scheduled, let's go forward with this. And before I turn it over to Alicia, you know, I am lamenting the fact that every time I want to give Councilmember McDuffie some shine for all of the things that he is doing that we as a constituency care about, he's a man on the move. He always has so many things going at once, and he was actually scheduled to be with us. And what I wanted to do, I always like to do a quick look back before we look forward, is to thank him for some of the things that he did last year that advanced what I think is emerging as the center cut piece of focus for all of our work, which is racial equity. Last year in the budget, he put money in to do a disparity study, which is now underway. All of us who understand this work know that without reaching some threshold quantification of disparities that minorities face in DC, there's certain initiatives and certain approaches that we cannot legally pursue. And the intent of this disparity study is to give us an accurate, honest snapshot of where we are. He also launched a racial equity fund, which is beginning to roll out and will hopefully provide some catalytic infusion of resources for minority businesses here in the city. And of course, he continued to support our own DC Community Anchor Partnership, which is working with universities, hospitals, and now utility companies and major development corporations to specifically target more procurement opportunities for low-income businesses. So Alicia and Brett, please take our thank you for these things back to the council member. I say it to him all the time, but I also wanted a chance to say it in front of his membership. So given that, I want to turn it over to Alicia DeFazio, who is the committee director for the Committee on Economic Development. And before our call started, Alicia was sharing with me her really long and twisting kind of career path that has just given me instant confidence that she is right where she needs to be, doing right what she is currently doing. I think that after last year, you know, we were pleasingly surprised to see those specific initiatives that I mentioned come through the councilman and his team and his office. And so we're really anxious to hear how the councilman and his team see this coming budget year. They've done this before, so they know what we want to hear. So I'm going to turn it over to Alicia. And then after that, we'll hear from Brett Allen, who's the senior legal counsel for Councilman McDuffie and the committee on business and economic development. So Alicia.
Beautiful. And thank you so much again, Steve and crew, for your warm welcome. It is my pleasure to be here with you all on your annual Advocacy Day. As was noted, I do serve as committee director for Councilmember McDuffie. And it was also noted, he is big with respect to his interests around racial equity. So I will begin my remarks with just sharing a bit of what we requested and then following up with what is funded to date and what we probably seek to also continue to fund or request additional funds for. So as you may recall, the council member, sent a letter to the mayor in February of this year before the budget was handed down, identifying a host of priorities that he wanted to see reflected in the mayor before it was, of course, sent to us for review. One of those pieces, again, keeping mindful that you're all totally interested in affordable housing and economic development, was the study and development of a guaranteed income program for the district to assist some of our households that fall below the federal poverty line to help them sustain themselves during the pandemic and beyond. In addition, his baby, if you want to call it, is a signature piece of legislation he had introduced earlier this year, the Baby Bonds Bill, or the Child Wealth Building Act of 2021, which again seeks to be a much more long-term investment in children and young adults in our city to help break and ameliorate that racial wealth gap that we see. I believe many people may know that 81% or the incomes, median incomes of some of our white colleagues or neighbors is 81 times that of the median income of African Americans in the city and region. So hoping that this baby bond initiative will be able to ameliorate and close that wealth gap. With respect to businesses, our letter did request a handsome sum of money for legacy businesses, meaning long-term businesses, many of which are owned and operated by persons of color, to assist with technical incubator and all that good stuff for those, in addition to some funds to help them acquire their physical establishments and to cover some increases they may have seen in occupancy expenses. We also are interested in, again, assisting our CDFIs and MDIs, minority depository institutions and community development financial institutions, to have some loan funds, loan capital, equity, loan loss pool, guaranteed pool to assist minority businesses, again, to help women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses to grow and stabilize and expand here in the district. On the housing front, we did request that the mayor put in a super amount of housing trust fund monies or investment, which we did see come to fruition. And we were a bit bold with respect to another housing request, and that was for the acquisition of the Marriott Wardman Park Hotel that's in Ward 3, in hopes that we can produce some awesome workforce, affordable, permanent supportive housing to help support the mayor's goal of providing upwards of 12,000 affordable units across the city by 2025. We also have not forgotten about folk who want to make sure that they can own, and asking that we kind of create a new down payment assistance program above and beyond HPAP to target persons who actually graduated either from a DC public school or vocational programs such as the DC Infrastructure Academy, an academy that the council members saw that there was investment in last year's budget. Again, just wanting to make sure that folks who are homegrown, in addition to those who are newer and transient to the city, are able to thrive and benefit from the growth resiliency of our city. I don't want to end there. I will say some of the priorities that have been funded already include some support for businesses and residents whose health insurance premiums are in arrears due to the impacts of COVID-19. There's also funding in this budget for the DC bids, several of them, the Anacostia bids, the Golden Triangle bid, and the Southwest bid to help them recover, whether it be for an innovation district, whether it be for an arts and culture district, or what have you, in addition to funds for Great Streets. And so I don't want to do a spoiler, but I think we're looking to do something different with Great Streets this year. So be on the lookout for that in terms of funding and or boundaries. We also saw that there's the need for additional funding for our events and hotel industry, being that they were severely impacted by COVID. And so there are funds set aside for Destination DC to help that entity promote the district as a destination hub. Just as a reminder, our committee does oversee not only DMPED, but also Destination DC, Events DC, and the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, in addition to DISB and DSLBD, right? So last year, we, of course, made funds available and created a new equity impact fund that provides capital for entrepreneurs from socially disadvantaged backgrounds to have access to capital and to build those relationships that they need. And so we're hoping, of course, to have additional funds placed in the budget this year. $2 million is what's been identified thus far. So I don't want to say too much, but we are completing the disparity study. There are funds, again, in this year's budget to do that, to make sure that we have women and minority-owned businesses acting meaningfully, participating in opportunities with respect to the district's contracting dollars. I would be remiss if I did not bring up GoGo, being that the council member was instrumental in GoGo being named the official music, if you will, of the city. So there is roughly $1 million in the budget to assist and stimulate that part of the industry and sector, in addition to some funds for medical cannabis. As we know, we do have quite a bit going on with respect to medical cannabis, but not yet legalizing recreational cannabis. But we are hoping that we have opportunities to assist minority-owned firms and others that are interested in getting into the medical cannabis space. So there is money in the budget set aside for licensing application support for some of those individuals who are interested. So I'll stop there in the event there are questions, but definitely want to allow my colleague Brett Allen to share. He does have a bit of purview over LSDDE, Events DC, and can speak to some other initiatives there.
That's great, Alicia. And wow, what a robust lineup. I can honestly say that we were following a number of these, but not all of them. But I also expected to be surprised by the councilman in his office's initiatives. He and his team have talked to us about some of these as he's been developing the legislative proposals, but there are some that we haven't. So it's great to hear about all of the initiatives you mentioned. Since I just have one question, why don't we switch to Brett for his presentation, then we'll come back, Alicia, and we'll ping pong between you and Brett with questions that people may have. Brett?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, so I'll reintroduce myself, Brett Allen. I'm a senior legal counsel with Councilmember McDuffie. So I'm just going to supplement a little of what Alicia said. She pretty much ran off the list of the council priorities. I will say that there's a few things that just kind of I'm identifying. One was Alicia mentioned the disparity study and making sure that that is funded. As you know, this is there was something important to the council member as well as DC small businesses. And we've identified that indeed there was an extra $400,000 put in the budget by the mayor. So that was a good thing. It was requested that I know it's something that's also important is our neighborhoods and our communities. Small businesses. We were requested to stand up another main street in Ward 4. I believe it's Georgia Avenue, Northern Georgia Avenue, and that's something important. While that was not on our initial priorities, that's something we feel is important to try to seek funding for. So hopefully we can carve out some funding and stand that up. It's important to that community. With respect to Events DC, so there were some grant funds that Events DC gave out last year for excluded workers. That was in the budget this year. At this point, we don't know whether or not that is something that is going to be another Events DC responsibility. Right now, it's captured under the DMPED fund. So stay tuned for that. We just have to figure out where that's gonna, will that be where that will be administered at this point. But I have nothing other than what Alicia said. I can stand by to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for that. I do have one question in the chat, and it's much a statement as a question, but so just bear with me while I read it. I'm a DC resident since 1976 and a member of Capitol Hill Village, a community organization concerned about issues relating and relevant to seniors throughout the city. I have an issue relating to affordable housing and developments like that before the mayor now and before the council soon, such as Hill East Reservation 13. Can city policies promote affordable housing that accommodates residents of all ages, but is also inclusive of a continuum of senior housing ranging from independent living apartments for seniors, assisted living facilities incorporating memory care, and facilities offering skilled nursing? And I see, Alicia, you nodding your head, so I think you're familiar with this issue.
I am. So I thank you all and your member for the question. I will say that I think seniors often are prioritized with respect to the development of affordable housing. Not necessarily sure if that community sees that and realizes it, but I know the mayor and the council member both and alike really put a preference, if you will, with respect to seniors. I will say that although it may be public housing, but a lot of times when those communities are redeveloped, it's usually the senior housing that's first provided. I will also say too, when we think of the private developments, I think folk are much more interested in housing our seniors because they're seen to be a bit more calmer, they're manageable day to day, and then there is that huge injection of income and investment there. I will also say that one of our budget priorities was to support a bill that passed the council a few years ago, but was not yet funded. And that was to eliminate property taxes for seniors age 70 and older who reside in the home that they've owned for a certain period of time and whose income is about $60,000 annually or thereabouts. We also believe in the aging in place piece. So we requested funds to assist DHCD's Safe and Healthy Homes program, which would expand funds for program to make repairs, specific repairs that aren't available now, whether it be basement waterproofing, mold remediation, sump pump installation, and the like, because our constituent services side has heard a lot from seniors, particularly that those type of investments are needed with respect to home repairs and addressing some code violations and the updates of ACVAC and the like to help seniors age in place. So I will say that, you know, the provision of affordable housing for seniors is something that is on our radar. And I know you spoke a bit about the Hill East project. I believe that is one as well. And lastly, before I close, I will say when we requested that the Wardman Park Hotel be acquired for the district or by the district, that there would definitely be senior housing provided there. We want to make sure that we have all income types and populations represented and accommodated whenever we do affordable housing in this city.
I'm sorry, great. Thank you so much. Great answer, and I appreciate the detail in the answer. I know that all of us have been having our own, some similar, some different views about the plight of businesses on commercial corridors. And I know that the councilman and you all as a team have been, have had a lot of people sharing information and pain points and everything else, just as they have with us. So can you share the council members' plans to help the Main Street program respond to the needs on their corridors? I know there are several prominent corridors in Ward 5, but I know that the councilman has been looking beyond just his own ward at corridors throughout the city.
Brad, do you feel comfortable taking that one?
Well, I do know that as far as the commercial corridors are concerned, you know, just making sure that the main streets have the funding they need to operate. You know, in the last DSLBD hearing, you know, there was a big discussion around how are the main streets best utilizing these funds? Are we spreading ourselves too thin, or you know, or are we being responsible with, you know, with certain areas that might need a little more injection of funding, and other areas that might have already been kind of established, but yet they are, but they're funded equally, right? And so that's something that we're definitely looking into to try to figure out if there needs to be some adjustments made. But it is a priority because we realize that even now, after the pandemic, some areas were hit harder than others, and need additional funding. As well as I do want to say, with this legacy business, it's a PLACE Act that we just introduced. It's important because what it does is it combats the effects of gentrification. We have many of our longstanding businesses that are, and we, they're termed legacy businesses in the Act, which have been around for 15 years or more, or I'm sorry, 10 years or more for small businesses, and 15 years continuously. And they're finding that, as rents, the leases is over, and the rents are raised, that they can no longer operate. So that act allows for financial assistance up to $50,000 per year, as well as a tax rebate for any property taxes that are included in the rent. So these are things that, again, are important, but it's difficult because every commercial corridor has their own priorities. And so it's just something that needs to be looked at carefully. But it is a priority of ours.
Yeah, and we've heard that that conversation not only with other council members, but from the mayor's folks as well. Trying to come up with a right-sized support system to actually support exactly what you described. We have two more questions. I think we can get them in before we bid you adieu. One is, these sound like several good new initiatives. What initiatives does the council member support to make existing affordable housing developments and communities and small businesses who work with such communities survive the revenue losses of COVID? And I know that is a challenging question because I think we're still figuring out what all that looks like. But happy to hear any response that you may have.
Oh, sure. So I actually took notes of several things. I saw that question come up through the chat. So I will say that it was actually Councilmember McDuffie who served as the impetus of what was and is the Bridge Fund. So last year, after COVID had kind of devastated our communities, small business corridors and the like, he introduced legislation that would say, hey, Mayor, we need to put X number of dollars into strengthening these corridors, and of course, around the preservation of housing. And therein came this $100 or $80 million bridge fund to assist restaurants, small businesses, and the like. I would also say Councilmember McDuffie was also the lead when it came to providing assistance for child care facilities and employees to make sure that they were able to sustain themselves and their businesses during the pandemic. I also mentioned that we are super supporters of our legacy businesses, and something that had been provided funds for was through an industrial bank. So we know that when we think about communities of color and or small entrepreneurs, it's generally some of our CDFIs, MDIs, and the like an industrial bank who provides that support. So we are thinking of putting some additional funds in to assist small businesses with acquiring their properties, also doing some more incubator assistance support, and knowing that we were somewhat, I would say, instrumental in CNHED's, anchor partnership and the like. I will also say that Great Streets has been something of top of mind for us. And so I didn't want to show our hand, but just look forward to something extra being done in this year's budget to assist Great Streets in some particular corridors. I also want to pivot just a tad bit to address the question as it pertains to affordable housing, and to say that this year there is legislation, whether it be subtitles in the budget, that speaks to creating more parity, if you will, between nonprofit housing providers, churches, and the private developers, to make sure that those who receive LIHTC and other tax benefits are able to participate. So in the event you have a development company partnering with a church or a similar entity, that they both would be able to receive those benefits. And the church, if you will, nonprofit, could be the lead. So there is language and funding in this year's budget to provide that sort of parity, because we get a lot of requests for tax abatements, right? So whether it be from a nonprofit, whether it be from a church and the like. And one instance, there was a church to say, well, hey, you know, we went out for new market tax credits, we stood this thing up, and we had to no longer use our church status, so we aren't tax exempt, but we're providing affordable housing and doing other things. So this type of assistance would help groups like that in that kind of predicament, and limited equity co-ops, right, participate and receive tax benefit and assistance. So I'll pause there.
That was great, and you certainly wrapped around the issue. We actually are winding down because we have these hearings kind of back to back. But a comment that you made, Alicia, clearly drew attention, because we have like 3 successive questions around grade streets. I think the one that maybe captures the points made is, could you talk a little more about the grade street changes? You hinted at them in your comments.
But I didn't want to say what they were, because they still have to be approved, right? We're working on language. We drafted some things with respect to some boundary. I am in communication with the staff at DMPED that manages 8 grade streets. I see there is a question from our Adams Morgan bid with respect to the amounts and when funding will be made available. I would think that they will continue to be made available as they generally are, and that the funding will still be what it has been. So I don't have the specifics on that, but I can certainly reach out to that team at DMPED to learn more.
So in other words, coming to a theater near you soon, correct?
Exactly. But yes, we always advocate, always push forward. You know, the council member is a big fan of both Great Streets and Main Streets. You know, the businesses along those corridors have been excellent partners, and we value them and their benefit that they have to communities, because it's quite, you know, catalytic in terms of that investment and what that seeds, and, you know, just the recourse of that is good.
So I want to thank you all, Alicia and Brett. Thank you, first of all, just for being with us and sharing the information, particularly for taking time in your newly created holiday by being with us today and not requiring us to reschedule. I just want you to know that's personally as well as organizationally appreciated. There are a couple more questions, and we will capture them. And Alicia, we may send you and Brett just a quick email on anything we think may be new or has not been covered and what is in the question stream. And most importantly, and again, I say this all the time, but please express our collective gratitude personally to the council member for his leadership and his vision and his commitment, his use of political capital to help advance causes that are not easy to address and not easy to face and not easy to solution to us is very noteworthy. The things that we've cared about for decades that actually represent the creation of CNHED, he has really picked up the torch and carried some of those things further than we could have imagined in such a short period of time. So please express our gratitude directly to the councilman, and thank you for your time with us this morning.
We shall, and thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
I will see most of you in about 30 seconds.